Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Future of Law is Today, the podcast bringing you straight talk on law, legal tech, and where the profession is going. I'm your host, Cheskino, and we're cutting through the hype to talk about what's changing in this field, and what still needs to. Today's guest is Robert Forte Jr., founder of Forte Tax Law, where he guides his clients through complex IRS disputes with unwavering confidence and advocacy. He's also the voice behind The Reality Brief, a weekly newsletter that puts a spotlight on what practicing lawyers are really saying about legal tech behind closed doors. It's what lawyers say in private, published in public, taking a hard, honest look at tools, trust, and transformation in the legal profession. As both a practicing attorney and a pastor, Robert brings a unique blend of legal rigor, ethical perspective, and human-first communication. Today, he's joining us to dig into legal tech's promise, its pitfalls, and the reality every legal team needs to know. All right, Robert, great to have you on the podcast. It's always a pleasure talking with you. And I know you have a lot of great insights about what's going on these days with law and legal tech. So first, before we jump into that, can you tell me a bit about your dual background as a lawyer and pastor? Because I don't think I've ever met anybody else who has that specific professional combination.
Okay, no problem. We exist. I do run into a few of us every now and then. But for me, I guess it started obviously a while back. My father's a pastor. So I grew up in that environment, being a pastor's kid, a preacher's kid. Made a decision early in life that I wanted absolutely nothing to do with that life, the life of ministry. And I think that's really what led me into law. I was trying to find a profession maybe as far away from ministry and spiritual life as possible. So I went to law school shortly, and my plan in going to law school was always to work for myself, always kind of had that entrepreneurial spirit. Went to law school, went straight into private practice, thought I was happy doing what I was doing. Over time, probably practicing for about maybe a year, maybe two, started to kind of feel a calling into ministry, started to get more interested in ministry, but still fought it for a number of years before I just kind of gave in and said, okay, I believe this is what I'm being called to do. I'll submit to that calling. Then I started preaching. Eventually, I left my father's church and launched my own church and started pastoring and pastored a church for maybe about 5-6 years. And then we stopped meeting during COVID. So that's kind of how those two came together. So at one point I was practicing law full time, doing ministry part time, and then it shifted to where I was doing ministry full time, law part time, and then it was just kind of a combination of the two back and forth for a number of years.
Very nice. And so what are you focusing on at this point, if I may ask?
In terms of law or ministry,
Yeah, is it still a balance or?
it's primarily law right now, but I have to admit, I get into these times where I feel out of balance, and I'm there now, to be honest with you, because I feel like there's this urge in me to get back into pastoring. And I was actually talking to people about this yesterday. And our plan was always to do a relaunch after. It's a real long story that I won't go into as to how I end up getting out of ministry during COVID. Ended up going back to my father's church to take over for a while he was going through some a medical issue. And we'd always planned to relaunch our church, and we just haven't. And now it's been 5 years and we haven't relaunched it. I was still doing some ministry kind of in that time, but here last year or so, I haven't done very much in the way of ministry work, and I'm starting to feel that. I kind of feel like there's something missing in my life. So I'm looking to get back into some form of maybe ministry part-time or maybe even full-time in 2026.
That's fantastic. I'm going to be curious to see how you continue to balance that going forward, because I've never been in ministry, but I get what you're saying about feeling that lack of balance when you're all in on one path, because mine has been different, but I've also had my own dual or at least varied career path. So I get that sense when you lean a little too far into one thing and then you're like, well, I feel like I'm neglecting a part of myself.
Exactly.
So one of the reasons, or really the main reason you and I got in touch in the first place, was that I saw on LinkedIn you've been very active writing about legal tech and how lawyers are reacting to it and dealing with it and trying to navigate this world as more and more people are jumping into AI and trying to figure out, well, everyone's saying I need to learn this stuff. How do I actually use this to augment my practice? And can I use it that way? So can you tell us a bit about how did you get into writing about legal tech?
That's a great question. And if you'd asked me a year ago, if I'd ever be writing about legal tech, I'd say absolutely not. I don't have a tech background, but I have practiced law for over 20 years. So in that 20-year time period, of course, I've used all sorts of legal tech products going back 15 years ago with LexisNexis and Westlaw, things of that nature. And so actually what happened was I had been practicing for a little over 20 years and was just looking to say, hey, what am I going to do with this next phase of my life? And now that I've practiced for a couple of decades and I do have the shiny object syndrome, that's real with me. So there's always be looking at, hey, what else can I go do? So I had been approached by someone I met on, at that time, Twitter, who had a publishing company. And at that time, I think he saw my bio and it listed I was an attorney and a pastor. And kind of like you said, that for him, he had never really run into anyone who had that kind of dual background. And so he asked me if I'd jump on a call with him, which I did. And at the end of the call, he said, hey, I think you have some great insights that would make for a wonderful book. So we started the process. I ended up joining with him and through his publishing company and started working on a book, which is still a work in progress. But through that, my wife is from Jamaica, and so we had gone to Jamaica to visit. And I was sitting across the street at a resort from the beach, and I'm working on the book, and I'm thinking, I could get used to this life, sitting across from the beach, making money, even though I wasn't making any money at the time, but making money through writing. And so I said, I want to pursue that, try to find ways to make money as a writer. And this goes back to me being in college. I was an English major. I had always talked to people and had other people talk to me about, hey, you should write a book, and just never thought I had anything to write about. So that led me to looking into other opportunities to get into writing online. And I ended up joining an online cohort called Ship 30 for 30 by Nicholas Cole and Dickie Bush, very popular cohort, fantastic cohort. Through there, I started writing on Twitter. And at that time, and this is maybe 3 years ago, I had a Twitter account, but I didn't even know how to do a tweet. As a matter of fact, when I went through Ship 30 for 30 during the cohort, I actually asked someone, hey, how do you tweet? So that was kind of the start of it for me. And then through Ship 30 for 30, that was their flagship program. They launched another program called Premium Ghostwriter Academy, PGA. And I thought about that. So, what, maybe I'll just do some ghostwriting. Now I'm kind of winding down my law practice and going into this next phase. I'll do some ghostwriting. And so I went through that cohort. And in that cohort, they talk to you about defining your niche. And so for me, after much thought and changing my mind over the course of time, I was trying to find somewhere where my ministry background and my legal background kind of converged. And I thought, hey, you're a lawyer, but you see the world through both a legal lens and a ministerial lens. And I said, why don't you apply that to law and legal tech? So I started writing on LinkedIn. And that was really the first time I started writing on LinkedIn. But initially, I was writing about the benefits of educational email courses to help legal tech companies with their marketing. Because through PGA, what they teach you is how to do educational email courses, and then you can branch off from there. So I was writing about that, getting a little bit of engagement, not very much. And then once I think I in the process of looking into the ghostwriting and trying to find clients to ghostwrite for, I had to look at legal tech websites and review their marketing. And it's then when I started to see, what, there may be something here for me, because the marketing was just, I was thinking to myself as a 20-year lawyer, who are they marketing this to? This is obviously not being marketed to lawyers, or at least it didn't seem like it to me. So I started writing some posts about that. And then I wrote a post that ended up going viral on LinkedIn after talking to a managing partner at another law firm. And the response from that was just overwhelming in terms of lawyers reaching out to me, a lot of people in the legal tech field and the legal profession reaching out to me saying, thank you for saying what we've wanted to say for years, but we're not in a position to say it, but you can say it because you're not in legal tech. You're an outsider who has a different or maybe a unique perspective with the blend of the ministry and legal lens. So that's how that got started. And that was just a couple of months ago. Actually, I think that was, if I'm not mistaken, it may have been August, September timeframe when that post and a few other posts went viral. And just based on the comments, the DMs, the feedback, that's when I said, you know what, this is an area where you just need to kind of drill down and take on this role of being that voice for people who feel like, hey, we can't say this, but you can speak on our behalf, and been doing it since then.
Yeah, like I said, that's really how I got in touch with you. It's true. You've been saying things that need to be said, and they're honest, they're valid criticisms. But yeah, to your point, I'm a former lawyer, and I've been working in legal tech marketing for years now. And from that role, I have felt often frustrated when I look around and I see the way that many legal tech companies are approaching marketing, messaging, content creation. Yeah, there I think is a fundamental disconnect. I've been having conversations about this with several people recently, and to some extent, I think it's a natural consequence of just how what legal tech is and how organizations work. That you're not going to have one person who's a trained lawyer and a trained engineer and has a business background and has a marketing background. Like it's just nobody is that much of a unicorn. I'm a lawyer with an MBA in marketing and I've done some coding, but even then that's pretty unusual. So when you have plenty of very smart people, but they're all knowledgeable about their one domain or maybe one or two domains, right? But in order to bridge that gap, really, when you're marketing legal tech, and this is in my perspective, having done it, you need somebody who understands law well enough to understand what lawyers are actually doing every day and what keeps them
Exactly.
up at night, what their goals are. You need somebody who understands tech enough to break it down into simple terms and explain it, not in a condescending or patronizing way, but still, it doesn't do any good to lecture people about your AI architecture or how your algorithms work. You're not training engineers. You're trying to
Right.
tell people that you've built a solution that helps them solve their problems, right?
Exactly.
And then you also need to understand business because ultimately people invest in software solutions or AI solutions because you're helping them get better results for their organization. So bridging that gap, to your point, it is tricky. And yeah, I think a lot of legal tech companies just struggle to do it. Again, smart people, great people, very talented, but you have this kind of culture clash and that creates communication gaps. And I think a lot of these companies really struggle to bridge it. And then you touch on something else that's really important, and we'll dig a little deeper into this later. But a lot of people feel constrained that they can't have really honest conversations about legal tech. And this includes not just legal tech employees, but also lawyers who have bought legal tech and had sometimes subpar experiences. And they want to be forthright about it, but for various reasons, they feel that they're constrained. They can't be quite so open about it. So yeah, that's a big part of the reason I've started this podcast, that I want to give people a venue to have more open, more forthright conversations, and not for the sake of venting, not for the sake of flaming. Like we all saw that Reddit post recently,
What
right?
Reddit post?
Not going to name any companies, but
Exactly.
yeah, whether or not it was from a real employee, right? There needs to
Right.
be a healthier dialogue
Exactly.
because constructive criticism is a good thing. If you're building a product, you need to know what's not just what's working, but also what's not working. And that's in the product itself, is in the delivery, it's in how you talk about it. So yes, I am very appreciative of what you're doing, and I'm looking forward to seeing how you continue to build on it. And I'm hoping that you and I and other people who are engaging in this conversation from different standpoints, that we will help to bridge that gap, that trust gap, that communication gap.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. And I'm glad you brought that up because a few things there. That's the only thing I've been trying to do is establish a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've had a couple of people who have made a reference to me being anti-tech or anti-legal tech. And I'm absolutely not anti-legal tech. I have no reason to be anti-legal tech. I'm a lawyer. So anything that makes our job easier or more efficient is great. That's a great thing. I just think, like you said, there needs to be a conversation because I talked about balance earlier in my own life, ministry versus law, but I also think there has to be a balance between, it's legal tech. And so there needs to be a balance between the tech aspect and the legal. And sometimes going back to when I was reviewing legal tech websites or talking to legal tech founders, I saw, at least my impression was oftentimes there's more of a focus on the tech aspect and less of a focus on the legal aspect of it. And I know, I've met founders who are lawyers, some of whom never practice law. They have law degrees. Some of them don't even have law degrees. But like you mentioned, most of these guys, and I've talked to quite a few legal tech founders, most of them really good people, brilliant people, very smart. But I think there needs to be more conversations with the people actually using the product and doing the work to make sure that it's not all about the tech, but it's really focused on, hey, how do we help lawyers do lawyering better? Not how do we replace lawyers, but how do we help them be better lawyers? And I think that requires conversations. I've had legal tech founders DM me who saying, you know what, I really appreciate your post. you're right. I just can't say that publicly. I can't say that publicly because it'd be bad for business, bad for my business, bad for my personal reputation. But I understand there is a conversation here that needs to be had. So that's all I'm trying to do is if I can bridge that gap and kind of help expand that conversation or get that conversation moving positively so that there's a better understanding between what legal tech can offer and what lawyers really need and why it has to be structured the way it has to be, which is simply because my name is on that. My license and my livelihood is on the line if AI doesn't get something right. So that's all I'm trying to do is foster that conversation.
Yeah. You raised several great points. One is that I think people often react to any sort of even constructive criticism as if a constructive critique is negativity and then you must be against the thing. It's like, no, if you care about something and it matters to you and you see it potentially having a positive impact on your life, your work, whatever, you're going to have some strong opinions about it. That's where constructive criticism comes from. The whole point is to improve it. I do hope that more and more people will realize that, yes, it is possible and helpful to have these honest conversations about what's going on with the tech and how it's working, how it's not working, how people are using it, and how we can all just make it better. Because really, we're all much better off if there is that shared understanding between the people building it and selling it and the people buying it and using it.
Exactly.
One trend, and I've seen this, I've heard about this, when a legal team invests in a legal tech platform and it doesn't work out, like there's an implementation that's dragging on for months or years and it's still not working, it's still not rolled out to all their teams or all their offices. They don't typically go and look for the next platform and say, okay, we tried this one, now we'll try that one. What they do is they step back and they say, well, all this stuff is crap and we don't have time to look through all these other platforms and figure out whether there's a better one. Let's just go back to doing things the way we were doing them because at least that worked well enough. And so people choose the devil they know instead of continuing to deal with the devil they don't. So it's really, whether you're selling the tech or trying to figure out how to select and implement tech that will help you practice law instead of getting disbarred, or if you're in legal ops, you need to find something that actually helps your legal team work better. For everybody in this ecosystem, we're all better off if the tech that's there works well, and we all have a sense of who should be using which tech. We don't have every platform trying to be all things to all people, but instead, this one serves law firms better, let's just say so. This one is designed for in-house legal teams, let's say so. Yeah, if this one is good for this type of document, but not that one, that's fine. Just say so. There's this expression that the riches are in the niches. And it's true. It's a fundamental principle of business that you can't be all things to all people. You can't please everybody. What you can do is solve one problem really well for a specific group of people. And of course, as you grow, you can develop additional products, additional modules, whatever it might be, additional platforms even to serve different people, different groups. But it has to be intentional. It can't be just a matter of throwing things at the kitchen sink, throwing things at the wall, mixing up my metaphors, throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. To your point, you have to really understand, well, how do people in this industry work? How do people in this role, what are they dealing with from day to day? It's fine to be a founder who hasn't practiced law, but if you're coming from that background, have you sat with people who have practiced law? Do you have somebody on your team who has practiced law? Have they actually used it in their work? Are you doing the concept is market validation? That's what they teach you in business school and entrepreneurship classes. Have you validated the market? Have you checked to make sure that you're not building a solution looking for a problem? Like you're actually solving a problem that the prospects you're pursuing, that they actually have.
Right. Yeah. And that's so important. And that goes back to, I think, the marketing aspect to a certain extent, because, and this goes back to when I was first kind of writing online about educational email courses. I saw so much marketing around every rollout was going to be revolutionary, transformative. It's going to change your practice and your life. And I'm thinking, okay, I've used these products over the years in varying degrees. To date, none of them have transformed my life. None of them have been revolutionary. And I don't need it to transform my life. It's like you said, I needed to do one thing really well. Don't try to be all things for all. Do one thing really well. And like you said, over time, hey, now we got this fixed. Now we can go on to the next thing that we need to do. But I think there just needs to be more transparency in the marketing. And I get it. It's marketing. I'm not a marketer, but I understand how marketing works. And hey, we built I wrote a post a couple of days ago based on a conversation I had with a founder. And my advice to that founder was, hey, build something boring. Okay. And I realized that doesn't make for great marketing copy. So it doesn't sound nearly as exciting as, hey, this is going to transform your life and your practice, or this is revolutionary. But that's how I think about it. Let's start small and build from there. And I think there'd be a lot less pushback against legal tech if there was just more transparency. Hey, this is what we're good at right now. This is what we're working on. Here's some issues that you might have. Because again, I want to know as an attorney, what is this product going to help me do, and where are the issues going to be that I have to be on alert for to make sure when I sign my name on that document, I can trust that the document is correct and there's not going to be some pushback and I'm having to go talk to someone at the state bar about my license because I have a feeling the legal tech founder is not going to be by my side when that meeting gets called. So that's my concern. That's my law license, my reputation on the line. So let's be transparent. Tell me what the limitations are, and then I can make an informed decision as to whether or not I want to go with this particular product at this particular time.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, you raised multiple fantastic points. One is that nobody gets up and says, man, I really want to transform my entire workday today. Right? Like maybe they feel it if you say you can transform what you do and enjoy your job more, but you need to lay that on concrete terms. And so there is potential for transformation with good tech. But the transformation, to your point, it might come in a way that isn't particularly flashy or exciting. It might come in the way it's the headache, right? What is that key pain point? What is that bottleneck, that communication gap, that thing that just does not work? Nobody wants to handle it because they're tired of it being such a hassle. Once you take that off people's plates, that's where the transformation comes. When somebody is spending 10 hours a week doing something they detest, the least favorite part of their job, and then you make it so it only takes 5 hours, or better yet, it only takes a couple hours. Then you've eliminated a headache, you've eliminated a lot of stress, you've given them some concrete chunks of time back in their work week, and they can do something else with it. Maybe that's doing other work they couldn't get around to before. Maybe that's better client service or better communication with their stakeholders if they're in-house. Maybe it's going home and spending time with their families, taking a nap, watching their favorite show, having a hobby. Whatever it is, that's where the transformation comes in. If you're selling, there's a lot of talk about efficiency, but efficiency by itself is not just about moving quickly. It's really about, well, what are you going to do with that time that you've hopefully gained once you've adopted that tech, you've adopted that solution, and you've modified your workflows and you've gotten that time back? Because that's really the end goal for the person buying it. It's not just about doing this thing faster, because maybe doing that thing faster just means, okay, you can do it twice as fast, so now you're going to be handed twice as many of the thing to do, and your work week looks the same. It's just maybe a little more stressful now.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what does the transformation really look like? Are you selling an actual benefit? Are you just making people more effective worker drones? Like what?
Right.
Yeah, let's step back and think about how we're actually framing it when we tell people we're going to help them do everything faster and more efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely.
So we've touched on the fact that a lot of lawyers can't or won't talk openly about negative experiences they've had with legal tech. Why is that? What's holding them back?
That's a great question. And I think it depends on who the attorney is and what level they're at within their firm, assuming they're in a firm. So if it's the associates, they can't talk about it because someone higher up made the decision to purchase this probably very expensive legal tech product, and they don't want to hear from some associate that it really doesn't work. I know it doesn't work because I'm the one using it on a day-to-day basis. And as a matter of fact, not only may it not work, it may be creating more work. Okay, because now I use the AI because you purchased it and you say I have to use it, and then I have to go back and double check everything. So I'm having to do extra work, and maybe there's some extra steps. And I'll tell you, again, I've gotten lots of DMs and comments on certain posts. One of my favorite DMs was just from an associate at a law firm. Basically, she just simply said, thank you for saying this because I wish I could say it, but I can't. And again, that just really resonated with me because I kind of felt her pain and her desperation in that comment. Like, I'm being forced to use this product every day, but it doesn't work, or it's not doing what we expected it to do. But I can't go and tell someone that because I'm just an associate in the firm and I don't have that type of authority or that type of voice. I think on the other end of that spectrum, if you're the managing partner and you're the one who approved the purchase, well, now your reputation's on the line. What do you do when you spent 6 figures on a legal tech product and find out it either doesn't work or it's causing additional problems or it's not fitting in with your existing workflows? It's like you were saying earlier, are you going to come back and say, well, we'll just go out and buy another 6-figure legal tech program to replace this one? So I think there's some pressure there to say, hey, make it work. Or what I've seen sometimes, and not in all cases, but sometimes is the blame gets shifted. There's nothing wrong with the product. It's just there's this pushback from the people using it. They don't want to use it. They're, how we like to talk about attorneys as we're being risk averse, and we're having to battle that. So I think that's part of it as well. So I really think it depends on who it's coming from in terms of their ability and their willingness to be able to speak out on these things and say, you know what, this product, while it might do some good, there are certain areas where it's actually causing us to be less efficient and not providing us with the results that we wanted or we thought we would receive, especially based on what we may have been promised during the demo phase. So that's kind of how I see it on those two ends of the spectrum, the managing partners or maybe GCs, and then the people actually doing the work at the associate level.
You raised some great points there. And, I talked about communication gaps. Yes, there are gaps between legal tech vendors and buyers and end users, but there are also gaps within legal teams. And this is not just limited to buying legal tech. This is a management issue. It's not to point the finger at partners and GCs, but to me, the first question that pops into my mind is, well, if the people using the tech were not involved in the decision to buy the tech, right, why not?
Great point.
Why were they not consulted? Because I've seen this in other fields as well, not just law. There's a big push to say, okay, we're going to be more efficient, we're going to be more modern, we're going to adopt this big tech platform. Leading up to the implementation, all the people who are actually going to have to use it are saying it does not work for what we do because of this reason. But leadership does not listen. And then once it's rolled out, people are trying to use it. But sure enough, it has all the problems people said it had. Now they're trying to jam a square peg into a circular hole, because the leaders who chose the platform did not listen to people who are going to have to use it. So really, that goes back to the principle of change management. And this is one thing where, a slight tangent here, but I feel like law school, to really prepare people for the practice of law, it needs to go beyond just case law. There are some schools doing this better than others, but it's really, you don't learn management skills in law school, even though many lawyers will be managers. Some people are trying to start teaching legal tech and AI in law schools in various ways. But yeah, and this isn't point the finger at law schools, strictly speaking, but again, it's looking at how are we training the next generation of lawyers? How are we training the current generation of lawyers to adapt to a more tech-forward way of practicing? And in general, how are you selecting, identifying, and promoting the people in your organization and nurturing the talent who can be good leaders rather than just good practitioners of specific areas of law? So I think it's a bigger conversation than just buying legal tech, but it does, I think, because so many of these investments, as you said, it's often a 6-figure investment in this or that technology platform. And if it doesn't work, if you're promised everything's going to be 4 times as fast and it turns out not, then yeah, it's easy to see right away if expectations were not met and if it looks like a poor investment. So I think there has to be a better way. And there's also the question of enterprise software, where does every firm and every in-house department need enterprise software, especially sight unseen? If they don't know that it's going to deliver those productivity gains, is it a good idea to plop down that 6-figure investment? Is there something smaller you can start with? Again, going back to the idea of what's that one thing that's broken, that one process that is slowing things down, that one bottleneck, that one communication gap. What if you start there instead? It may not be a big splash, may not be something you want to make a press release about.
Right.
Here's a little aside. As a marketer, I'm convinced that the only people who read press releases are the CEOs of the companies writing the press release and the CEOs of their competitors. And if you're issuing a press release, it's the same thing. Your partners may have read it. The partners of your peer firms may have read it. Nobody else cared, right? So pardon me if that ruffles anybody's feathers, but nobody actually cares about the press release. So instead of making a tech investment for a press release, what if you make it for your team?
Absolutely.
What if you start small? Fix something that you know is broken, that the people doing the work in the trenches, they know is broken. Fix that. And then build from there. Once you fix that one thing, where else can you apply that same tech? How many other problems can that same tech fix? And once you've gotten to the limit with that, roll it out across different teams, different offices, find the next problem, right? So yeah, it doesn't have to be that. And part of this is maybe vendors overpromising. For a while, there's this mindset that every solution had to be a holistic end-to-end platform, whatever that meant in the particular area. Maybe it's all of your contracts, maybe it's all of your e-discovery, all of your litigation documents and filings and briefs and memos. But whatever it is, there's this idea that, well, this one platform should cover your entire legal practice.
Right.
And if it does that well, Okay, great. But if it doesn't, maybe that's not what vendors should be trying to provide. Maybe they should be focusing again on the one thing they can do better than everybody else. And maybe as a buyer, that's not what you should be trying to buy. Maybe you find the smaller solution that just fixes the one thing you know is a problem today. And you can work on the next one next quarter and add one every quarter. And then you start getting incremental improvement. There's another thing I want to touch on that you've touched on a couple times. So many vendors talk about efficiency, and there are two issues with that. One, I mentioned the cultural disconnect that you have a lot of people who have worked in other tech fields. They've worked in other industries where people just want to do things faster, and that's a good selling point. But in law, for one thing, there's the obvious note of the billable hour. If lawyers do things more efficiently, then there go their billables, or more efficiently, excuse me, there go their billables. And, you actually have a bit of a problem on your hands unless they
Yeah.
switch value-based billing. And so maybe that's a good thing that people are going to have that conversation. That could be its own entire podcast episode talking about switching billing models. But if you're promising efficiency, are you promising something that's actually helpful? And also, when we talk about efficiency, I try to be careful when I use that word in marketing materials because just doing something quickly is not being efficient. If it wasn't done well the first time, you weren't efficient. You were fast and sloppy, right?
Right.
So there's a difference between efficiency, delivering efficiency, and just delivering speed without quality controls. And I think that's something that some people get. I've worked with different companies, and some people get that, and some people do not, frankly. And so that's something where in tech in general, you have this Silicon Valley move fast and break things ethos.
Right. Yes.
That's fine for some organizations. Like if you're running a venture capital firm, you're investing in a whole portfolio of companies, and you know from the outset you expect 90% of them to fail. So you want all those companies moving fast and doing whatever they can, throwing things at the wall, because you
Yes.
know only 10% of them are going to succeed. So if only 1 out of 10 succeeds, you want them all moving fast and breaking
Right.
things till one of them finds something that works. But here's the thing. If you're a lawyer, that doesn't work so well for you. You don't want to be the guinea pig. Like you said, your license is on the line. If those are hallucinated cases in your brief, that's you getting sanctioned by the court.
Right.
And like you said, the legal tech vendor is not going to be standing by your side when that happens. And here's the other thing. Venture capital is fine for those businesses that benefit from it, right? They benefit from the mentorship, the connections, and yes, the capital. But if you're one of the 90% of companies that isn't the unicorn, right?
Hmm.
Did it help you? So,
Right.
I mean, it's a whole other conversation, right? I'm not saying that nobody should get that venture capital funding because there are going to be some unicorns, and that's a good thing. But not everybody's going to be a unicorn. And if not everybody is going to be the unicorn, especially when you have all these people coming from legal backgrounds where you're expected to be more methodical, more thorough, more practical, more analytical. Maybe it's a good thing to build that way. And so I've been having some interesting conversations with founders who have taken that approach where, yeah, they're not the biggest companies. They don't get the biggest headlines. But you know what they have? A lot of happy customers. They have a product that works and it serves their customers well, and they're building steadily over time. So kind of train of thought for me, but looking at, well, you have some companies that grew quickly, couldn't really sustain it,
Hmm.
and they're not all here today, right? But
Exactly.
then you have other companies that are building more slowly. Again, maybe they haven't attracted the headlines, but they have very low customer churn. Some of them are profitable already. So yeah, I do think there needs to be a little more introspection, that there's not one right path for everybody. Whether that's you as a buyer, don't go plop $100,000 down on tech just because you saw another firm used it.
Right. Right.
Right? So whether you're a buyer or a builder, don't go and just chase venture capital because you saw other people doing it and you wanted to be on a magazine cover. If you can make it happen, great. I'm happy for you. But consider that there might be other paths.
Absolutely.
And of course, I'm biased toward that because here I am with my JD/MBA background, and I'm talking to somebody who's an attorney and pastor, right?
Right.
But I do think there's some food for thought there, that there can be different ways of doing things and still enjoying your own success and serving people well.
Absolutely. I think those are excellent points. And I've written about that. I've talked to others about that. Just this concept that I think as the technology applies to the legal profession, it's just a different world. And you know, this again, having a law degree yourself and practice for a while, our profession is deliberate by design because of what's at stake. I had a conversation a couple of days ago with maybe last week with a tech founder that's built a great product or in the process of building a great product. And she asked me if I use AI, and I said I use it every morning. I said, I bought a coffee machine not too long ago. And every morning I ask ChatGTP, what kind of coffee should I make today? I said, worst case scenario, I get a bad cup of coffee, which sometimes I do end up with a bad cup of coffee, and that's fine. But in my legal practice, if I use, ChatGTP or some other legal product and I get a bad result, I can lose my license, and we've talked about that. Someone can lose their livelihood. Someone could theoretically lose their life, depending on your practice area. So there's so much at stake. So this rush to be, hey, let's do everything faster. Let's be more efficient. I'm more interested in let's get it right. If I have to slow down to get it right, I'd rather slow down, get it right. That's my focus. And then I think that ties back to what you were saying earlier, because that leads back to that transformation, because now I can sleep well at night because I know we did a good job on this case or this document or whatever, because we weren't trying to rush it through or just trust the AI. And I'm just not at the point, and this is just me personally, and others may differ, and that's fine. I'm just not at the point where I'm willing to trust the output from AI. And I know it's a process, it's going to get better over time, and I'm fine with that. But where things are right now, I'd rather slow down a little bit, make sure we're doing things right, ethically, to represent our clients as effectively as we can. And for me, that's the focus. And then another thing I thought about when you were talking, think about it, us as attorneys and how we handle process. You have a new client come in and you sit down, you gather all the facts, you get all the information, you look at all the options and possibilities, you do your research, your due diligence, and you take your time to make sure that you're going to get this done right. Sometimes, and I know this, maybe I'm the only attorney where this has ever happened, but I have clients who call me pretty regularly like, hey, why is this taking so long? you know, well, because we're trying to get it right. We don't want to rush anything. We don't want to miss anything. And we're working as fast as we can to make sure that we can get the job done as precisely as possible. And sometimes that takes a little longer than we anticipated at the beginning. And then when I think contrasting that with the people in law practices buying the technology, I think a lot of times there's just rush. Hey, let's just get it in and get things going. But that's not how we handle our profession. So maybe that shouldn't be how we handle our purchases either. I thought about that when you were saying some of the things that you were saying earlier. So I just think there's so much more at stake for technology in the legal profession than it is in certain other. I'm not saying, only the legal profession, but especially when you're dealing with what we deal with and what weights in the balance, there lies in the balance in terms of at the end of the day, when we conclude a case, what the outcomes are and what happens beyond that.
Yeah. You've mentioned risk aversion, that there's this idea, okay, lawyers are risk averse and that's why they don't want to use the tech. But when there's a trust issue and people have reason to have a trust issue because either they've been burned or they've seen the news stories about yet another attorney using hallucinated cases in a brief, that's a legitimate reason to have some trust issues. And there's something you posted about recently, the concept of time saved versus time shifted. When you're marketing legal tech, I've been in that position where I'm looking for, well, we say we're saving people time. How much time are we saving? And you get an estimate. Well, we estimate that it used to take an hour to review a document and now you can do it in 5 minutes. So just calculate that. We're going to say it's 95% time savings, or whatever the math ends up being. And sometimes it really is that kind of back of the napkin math. Well, we estimate it's down from 60 minutes to 2, so just divide that, and that's your percentage savings. And hopefully most vendors are doing something a little more robust in terms of benchmarking and timing tasks and using real documents. But it's difficult because not everybody, as we've talked about, not every end user can actually talk about how they're using the tech, and they know it's working, but they can't get into the weeds with you. They don't have the time, and they're not allowed anyway to disclose, we saved exactly this much time, we saved exactly this amount in worker hours, and the worker spend tied to those hours. Even if they'd like to, it's not always feasible. But just because you're estimating this task can go faster, that doesn't mean you're actually saving time for the end user. Because to your point, if you don't have the trust that the output is completely reliable, and it has to be complete, it can't be 95%, it can't be 90%. If you don't have the trust that the output is completely reliable, and there's no clear way, this is the other thing, there's no clear way right now for AI to tell you, this is the 10% I'm not sure about. This is the 5% I'm not sure about. That would solve the problem. And I'm not saying that would be easy to build, but if the AI can't do 100%, and if it can't tell you, here's the 5% I'm not sure about, you review this, then you basically have this dynamic where the lawyers have to go and review everything even after they read the AI overview. So you're actually adding, you pointed this out, you're actually adding time. You have, sure, the 10 minutes to review the AI's overview, And maybe there's some value in that at least is giving you some flags to look for, some landmarks, calling out a few things. But you still have to go and review the whole thing yourself if there's no better way to make sure you're hitting that 100% clarity that lawyers are aiming for. We know lawyers are human. I like to say that a lot of lawyers seem to wish they were robots and they try to convince other people that they are, but really they're human and lawyers make mistakes. But you're not going to just accept that you're going to miss things. You're still going to try to catch everything. So yeah, I think that goes back to the disconnect, that it's really, are you genuinely saving time for people, or because of the trust gap? And that's just part of that is a natural consequence of where a lot of the technology is today. I have talked to some vendors who are doing some cool things about trying to fix the trust gap with tech, and we'll see, maybe very soon there will be more of these solutions that are fixing that 10%, that 5%.
Exactly.
Right. And we'll see fewer of those issues. But for now, are you being honest about how much time you're really saving for teams? Or are you just kind of shifting the way people work? Because another thing is, you look in not just in law, but in general, if you're using AI to do something, like I use AI on a regular basis, and it does make a lot of things faster. But you're also shifting some of the things you do. So maybe I'm spending less time, I do a lot of writing, and maybe I spend less time writing everything from scratch, but I am spending more time reviewing the work of a co-writer or a co-editor. When I use AI to help generate any text, I'm not going to just trust it. I don't just copy and paste AI outputs. It can be a great brainstorming partner. It can be a great ideation partner. It can actually be much better than some interns I've worked with, not to be mean, but interns I've worked with at generating first drafts, right? There's a lot it can do really well, but I still don't trust it fully. And that's because I've spent so much time working with it that I know it might miss some key points, or it might, I mean, heck, it's trained on the internet. It might just parrot something that somebody else said that I disagree with.
Absolutely.
Right. So I am also spending more time reviewing outputs that are not mine instead of just writing everything from scratch. And I feel like that's a fair trade-off. But it's not something people are really acknowledging when they talk about, oh, just use AI and you'll do everything 2 times faster, 5 times faster, 10 times faster. And they're not specifying, well, where are all these time savings going to come from? And where is the quality assurance? If I care about the quality of my outputs, you might just want me to pump things out 10 times faster, but do you care what's in them?
Yeah.
So it goes back to, maybe not every profession cares that much about this idea of quality and trust, but lawyers care about it. So if you're selling to legal teams, are you taking that into account? Because if not, frankly, you might as well not be building legal tech. That's my thought.
Yeah, I agree completely. And like you said, I don't mean to suggest that there aren't advantages to it. And, sometimes there are legitimate time savings.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're at the point in the legal profession where we can trust AI. And I don't think we're at the point in the legal profession where we should. Because again, like I said, there's too much riding on that. And we've seen, unfortunately, the consequences of what happens when certain lawyers decide, I'm just going to trust the AI. And I don't know if that's so much as trusting the AI or just being lazy, okay, and not doing diligence. It's like, hey, I'll let AI spit this out and I'll just turn it into the court. And then when the court comes back and say, hey, we need you to come back in, we need to talk to you about something, then there's issues. But I think there's another issue as well related to this concept of just using AI to do things faster. And I've heard others talk about this as well. I think I've posted about it once or twice. And I think there's an argument to be made on either side, but there's something to be said in terms of in using AI to help you be a little more efficient. And yes, you got to go back and read it. Are you actually doing a disservice to lawyers, especially maybe new lawyers, who you have to develop these legal skills, and you develop these skills by doing the work. And sometimes I think by cutting corners or using AI to cut corners or to cut time, you could be depriving attorneys from really developing that legal skill set that you don't, like we kind of touched on before, we don't necessarily learn in law school when you're being trained to think like a lawyer, but you learn to practice law in the practice of law. And I think that's an element that maybe is often overlooked, that maybe just throwing something in the chat GPT or some legal tech product and having it spit something back out to me is not allowing me to sit down and do the work that helps me develop those legal skills, those legal muscles that I need to become a really good lawyer. And if I'm not being mentored by someone properly, because they're just saying, hey, see what chat GPT says about it, I think that's going to be a problem also. Now, I have had people push back against that and kind of say, yeah, well, if AI is spitting that out, you still have to review it, and that's going to help you learn some things. And then there may be some truth to that. I'm not going to discount that completely. But I do think that's something to be mindful of and be aware of. And maybe that's the old man in me saying, back in the day, I used to have to do all this, go down to the law library and get a physical book off the shelf and open it up and review everything myself and take my notes. And now AI can do all of that for us. I'm just not convinced as of today that that's the best use of AI in our legal practices.
Yeah, the training point is a great one because there have already been studies showing that in school, where a lot of students are using AI, especially to spit out whole papers for them, they're not developing the critical thinking skills that they're supposed to be developing. So critical thinking, persuasive writing, all of that. If you don't actually exercise the muscles, you don't build them.
Right. Yeah.
So I think, think about math. Calculators have been around for however many. I mean, technically, it's probably longer than decades, but definitely we've had handheld calculators for decades. But
Absolutely.
I still learned arithmetic in elementary school. I still learned
Right.
how to add and subtract and divide and multiply manually. Now my kids are learning it. And that's a good thing. Yeah, we could have all just plugged it into calculators, but it's good to be able to do some mental math and at least have some idea of how numbers relate to each other. Even if we're not all mathematicians, we're not all engineers, it's good to just have at least some intuition around how things work logically.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's the case with not just numbers, but with words too. So because the legal profession is built on abstract logic with words, if you're giving people what's basically a calculator for written outputs instead of numerical outputs, it's kind of like saying, okay, we have calculators, so we're not going to teach kids math anymore. And then being surprised when nobody can even run their own household budgets well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I agree completely. There needs to be a rethinking of, and it's in law school, it's in law firms and in-house departments, but it's really the whole legal profession. How are we giving young attorneys the chance to really learn what it means to practice law and to develop the reasoning skills they need and the practice management skills they need? Because yeah, you can put something into your legal tool and tell them learn from the output, but if we all know that the output is occasionally hallucinated, right? How do they pick out that 10% or that 5% that wasn't right? That's another issue. AI is great at augmenting an experienced professional in the field. And so right now, I think in any given field, there are experienced professionals who know what they're doing. They know what they can safely outsource to AI. They know where they need to check its outputs, and they're benefiting from that. But yeah, if you want to still be in business 5 years from now, 10 years from now, how are you training the next generation of people who will help you expand your business or grow your team or wherever you're working? So yeah, again, yet another thing we could spend a whole episode on,
Yeah.
probably more than one. But yeah, it's a fantastic point. All right, so I like to close with a little thing I call keeping it human. We've talked about your unique career path. What's something else you'd like to share with us today?
Let me think about that for a second. Fun fact. Well, I'm a girl dad now. So I have two adult sons, and then I kind of started all over again. And now I've got a wonderful little 5-year-old daughter who made me a girl dad. And I was always told that you never really know what true love is until you have a daughter. And I'm learning that, but I'm learning a lot of other things having a daughter. So it's very different. But I'm thrilled. I'm loving it, and she just started kindergarten, and she's already learning Mandarin. So that lets you
Oh,
know
wow.
how the world has changed a little bit. Yeah, she takes Mandarin in kindergarten, so she's already smarter than I am, and she's 5. So there's that.
That's fantastic. Yeah, my oldest is a girl. I have two, one girl, one boy. It's fun because they're both in elementary school, but it's fun seeing how they're developing their own preferences and their own viewpoints. And of course, they learn a lot from me and from their mother, and of course from their teachers. But it's seeing how they're synthesizing everything and making sense of things and developing their own preferences and goals and viewpoints and just making sense of the world around them, which is I'm still trying to make sense of it too, but it's fun to see. It's fun to see that.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Robert, it's always a pleasure talking with you. If people want to get in touch with you to talk about law, legal tech, or even something else like ministry, where can they reach you?
You can reach me on LinkedIn at Robert Forte Jr. That's Forte Jr. You can also email me at robert@robertfortejr.com. And I also have a newsletter. It's pinned on my profile on LinkedIn. So anyone wants to check out the newsletter on legal tech, that's another good place to go to get some more insights and let me know if you agree or disagree.
Fantastic. Well, Robert, thank you very much for your time. I enjoyed it. And
Likewise.
everyone else who listened, thank you for joining us. Please feel free to be in touch with Robert, with me. Both of us are always happy to talk about all things law and legal tech or just to chat about having kids. If you have kids, be in touch. Don't be a stranger. Thank you, everyone, for your time. That's it for this episode of The Future of Law is Today. Subscribe for more straight talk on law and legal tech. And share it with someone who still thinks Master of Laws when you say LLM. Thanks for listening.